Hello and welcome to another episode of Consensus with Canonizer. Kelly getting hydrated there, ready to begin. There we go. We have Kelly Casaday here and Brent Alsop and not an expert. So we've got the Canonizer Council assembled. How are all of you guys?
Good.
Hydrated.
Hydrated. Good. Not an expert. Are you hydrated? We can't see you, so we don't know. We're all concerned.
Isn't that a euphemism for have I had alcohol?
Could be. Kelly's drunk right now, I think.
I'm drunk on presidential power.
On presidential power, a good segue to what we're going to be discussing in today's episode. We are closing in on a local election right now. Three of us live in Sandy City, Utah. Not an expert does not live in Sandy, but there is a primary election coming up for a municipal election. And so it's sometimes easy to forget that there are elections that happen in between every 4 years. And so because we don't want to forget the ones that happen every 4 years, we're going to be talking about the 2028 presidential election. Who's excited or who's exhausted?
Me to both. Yeah, it's like I think this what sets America apart in many ways is to become the leader of the free world. You're campaigning for 4 or 6 years before that happens, and thought we'd walk down memory lane and then see if we could pick who we think is going to be each party's nominee.
Well, Kelly, can you walk us through the topic you've created here?
Sure.
Canonizer, to the stage
here. So when you go to Canonizer, you'll be met with this lovely slider, and also you can see all of our past episodes of our podcast. But the first one that's going to greet you is the 2028 presidential election. Let the campaign begin. So we click on that, and we can look and see what's going on here. And I've written a little bit about America's unique political nature, where the president is running years before he's actually elected, and the next campaign season begins the day after inauguration. And
I thought you were going to say the day after the previous election.
Well, that's true. I was trying to make it seem a little more civilized, that there is a little licking of wounds, though, and a little introspection. But you're right, and I think I'm right. It just begins immediately.
Yep.
So Donald Trump, according to the Constitution, can't run again. So we're left with an open presidency.
You think that matters with Trump?
Well, I think that the Constitution will prevail.
So you don't think Trump will?
No.
He's hinted that he wants to change that so he can run another term, right? So you don't think
he is,
that'll be an issue?
Yeah, I think he's a great troll, but it's not going to happen. It would be interesting to talk about the constitutional amendments that I think are wrong, and I think one of them is the limit on presidential terms, because immediately after being elected to a second term, the president basically loses all political clout. But that's a side issue. It goes along with my view of term limits in general. You lose the institutional knowledge that an elected official has, and then turn it over to a unelected bureaucrat, which I think is bad for democracy. But let's get back to this one. So, assuming President Trump cannot and will not run again, who is going to run? And there's already
points out a big assumption, because Steve Bannon and others are looking for loopholes. And the idea has been floated that he would run as a vice presidential candidate on the condition that the presidential candidate resign. And there's But anyway,
Yeah.
just want to point out that Brent's not completely insane on that one.
No. I know there's a lot of people who are talking about that, but I don't see any circumstance where that's real. And as we get closer, and if that comes up, certainly we'll be talking about it on Canonizer. But right now, I think what we're talking about is Trump is done, so let's see who will take his place.
Okay.
There's been a few polls already, and you've seen recently that Marco Rubio, who's the Secretary of State, has basically endorsed Vice President J.D. Vance for his run for office in now 3.5 years. And there was a poll taken that showed Vance winning against 3 Democrats who have expressed interest. Kamala Harris was one of them. But the big issue, another big issue to me, is just how tarnished, and this isn't to dump on Democrats because it happens every election. The losing party just kind of loses its way, it seems. But the Democrats, as Trump's not a popular president. He is underwater. I haven't seen a poll that shows him with a net favorability approval rating. Everything is net negative. But whether he's 49% approve or 36% approve, I've seen wide ranges in that. The Democrats aren't picking up any of that support. It's just sitting there. And so the Democratic brand seems to have been somewhat tarnished. And in fact, a person who did this recent poll of teamed up, it was Trump's pollster and another gentleman by the name of Angelone, who's a Democratic pollster. And he said, until they reconnect with real voters and working people who they're for, and what economic message, what their economic message is, they're going to have problems. Speaking of the Democrats, Republicans are not wildly popular either. They're at 45% approval. Democrats, I think, are at 33 right now in the Wall Street Journal poll. But that said, let's build some consensus. Like we can even include, do you think Elon Musk's America Party is going to make a difference, or a third party? Is that going to change things? We currently have 2 camps in here. One is Republicans are crushing it and will win in 2026 and 2028. Another one is Democrats will have candidates and messaging to win. Which one should we look at first?
The ridiculously optimistic one.
Okay. The Democrats, it is. No. So there are a number of polls. I just put the headlines in here that people can read, but I'll try and hit the highlights. Vice President J.D. Vance is ahead by a significant margin in most 2028 Republican presidential polls. That was from Emerson College. But one expert in the poll told Newsweek magazine, who conducted this poll, his fate is tied to the fate of Trump's second term. And if that fails to deliver, JD will wane. So, I mean, that's all assuming that Trump is going to continue doing what he said to do, or, depending on your point of view, destroy the Constitution and the country. There are other articles that are here about the 2026 Senate map, but it shows that Republicans actually have a very good shot at keeping the Senate just because of what seats are up this year. Senate, as you know, is elected every 6 years, the president every 4 years, House of Representatives every 2 years. And another article here, Trump's plan to keep the House in 2026. Republican chances surge. This was a very optimistic one. And then another article in here that says Democratic chaos will help Republicans, because that goes back to let me go to the Democrats here. Democrats have candidates messaging to win. I think this is a very optimistic headline because so far Democrats remain underwater, and there's actually seems to be a new poll every 2 weeks that says that they've sunk even further. So they're at the lowest level they have ever been in the history of polling, which isn't that old. This goes back to the early 2000s or late 1900s when they started asking the polls of your general view of each political party. But normally by 6 months into a president's term, the opposing party, the losing party, has started to come up again as the president's policies start to take effect. But here's a little bit of information. Nancy Pelosi is nothing but confident in as she was courting Gen Z voters this last week, and said that no House will win the House of Representatives, and she went on to say that we're going to win the presidency. There's a list here from the Hill of presidential contenders, and I thought this would be an interesting place to start. Who do you think is going to carry the Democratic banner into 2028? Which, by the way, like I'm rambling here, and I'd love to hear other people's thoughts, but like to me, it seems as you look at the local elections in New York and Minneapolis, that the socialist wing of the Democratic Party are the ones who are gaining traction. And you look at the oligarchy tour with AOC and Bernie Sanders and the crowds they were drawing. So with that in mind, the Hill thinks Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is the number one candidate for the Democratic Party in 2028. What do you all think?
I think you're wrong.
Thank you. Who do you think it is?
I need to find a reference, but the person who will lead the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party is institutionalized, is the person who's been in the party the longest, and they will shove that person down our throat.
Wow, a little bit of Democrat shade being thrown here. But I also think that's true. I'm going to throw in who I think my favorite is, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. I think he is seen as a more mainstream, moderate Democrat, somebody who has roots with the people, who hasn't taken a lot of what I think polling shows mainstream America doesn't agree with, kind of the left-wing part of the Democratic Party. But my favorite is Josh Shapiro. Jim, have you given it any thought?
Yeah, I have. I'm trying to not sound crazy when I start talking about this. So I'm trying to give thought to how to do that. I have a number of friends who I would previously dismiss as conspiracy theorists, who have expressed concern about whether or not there will even be another presidential election, and more pressingly, whether there will even be midterms. As Donald Trump sinks further and further underwater, it's really kind of fascinating to watch the whole Epstein scandal stick to him in a way that nothing has before. And so as Trump becomes increasingly desperate, he becomes increasingly venomous, increasingly vitriolic, and lashes out here, there, and everywhere. He's now telling us that Bill Clinton went to the sex island 48 times, and why don't we go arrest him, and why don't we go do this, and why don't we go do that? Listening to people like Steve Bannon, listening to Trump talk about a third term, does not strike me as simply just trolling. It strikes me as the fact that they are desperately looking for a way to be able to essentially put Donald Trump, install Donald Trump as the king rather than as the president. And so when I look at things like this, I think very often about some of my talking points with regard to the election. When people would talk about this last election, and they talk about how, okay, yeah, Donald Trump is loathsome, but it's his policies that I like, and let's talk about policies, and let's talk. I would always respond, I would love to be in a situation where we have the luxury of discussing policy. We don't have that luxury when you have somebody in office with absolutely no regard for constitutional constraints. Demonstrated that time and again, demonstrated that with an assault on the Capitol when he lost the 2020 election, demonstrated and called for the removal of constitutional governance in a Truth Social post. And yeah, he's just trolling. It said, there are people who are dead as a result of the 2020 riot at the Capitol. And so I think taking Donald Trump's abnormality and contempt for democracy seriously is something that is necessary. So when I start talking about this, and I start talking about candidates, I feel like I'm normalizing that. I feel like, oh, this is just all normal, and we're just in the middle of kind of a normal sort of election cycle, and golly, everybody's just looking at the next one, and it's just going to be, this is the way it's always been and the way it always will be. In the era of Trump, it's very hard for me to get there from here.
Yeah,
So,
I'm nervous about that, Nelson.
So when you start asking, okay, have I thought about this? The thing that I have thought about more than anything is, because Kelly, I agree with you. I think at least with regard to there's going to be another candidate in 2028. If for no other reason that Donald Trump has chronic venous insufficiency, at least that's what he's telling us he has. I'm thinking his health is probably a whole lot worse. The idea that he is going to be able to do this and be able to subvert democracy and not be dead. I don't know. I don't know if Trump makes it to 2028. But regardless, okay. So I just want all those caveats on the record before I jump into this and just kind of presume this will be a normal election. The challenge, particularly with the Republican nomination, is how much of Trumpism survives without Donald Trump. Because Trumpism, at least in my estimation with regard to Republican politics, bears little to no resemblance to Reagan conservatism and sort of the classic conservatism that was part of the party throughout my entire adult life up until 2016. The Republican Party used to stand for free markets and free trade. Now we have a president who just today is bragging about the fact that he's brought in $150 billion as a result of new taxes, which is what tariffs are. Tariffs are taxes, and they are taxes paid by Americans consumers. And we have a Republican president who thinks that huge taxes are wonderful. We have a Republican president that has championed a bill that is going to increase the national debt by $4 trillion, deficit by $4 trillion over the next 10 years. So on and on. It's like, are the Republicans ever going back to being Republicans, or Republicans going to continue to be Trumpers? And I think that eventually the fever breaks, but it's going to take more than one election cycle to do it. So with all that said, who is the heir apparent to Trumpism in the Republican Party? And right now that seems to be J.D. Vance, but I think that's a little bit by default. I don't think J.D. Vance has any sort of organic following among anybody. I don't think there's anybody out there that is hoping for a Vance presidency. One, or even if Donald Trump, for instance, were forced to resign, I don't think Republicans are going, yay, then we get J.D. Vance because J.D. Vance is our guy. I think J.D. Vance, just one of the reasons he was picked is that he wasn't going to overshadow Donald Trump. And Donald Trump didn't want a vice president. He wanted a vice president he could safely ignore, and that seems to be the case with Vance. So then you get any other Republican contenders, and one of them that I don't. So am I jumping the gun here because you were asking about Democrats, and
no, I'll listen to Republicans. I have my top two.
Who are your top two? Can we pull up your topic?
Yeah, it's I actually haven't written it on the topic. I was going to put it in as we were talking to show how this works, but mine are J.D. Vance and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis.
Yeah. Both of whom essentially are trying to follow in Trump's footsteps. I think DeSantis, I think this will sound laughable to some, but I think you have to look at the very real possibility that the next nominee will be Donald Trump Jr. He's expressed the desire to do it. I think if anybody can sort of piggyback off of the cult of personality, it's Donald Trump Jr. I don't think he's nearly as skilled and gifted a BSer as his father is. I think he may have vestiges of a conscience that make it difficult for him to sort of lie with the kind of impunity that his father does. But the reality is that MAGA is looking for Donald Trump to be president in perpetuity, and if they can't legally do that, they're going to try to find the next best thing. And I don't think J.D. Vance or Ron DeSantis is the next best thing. I think reasonable Republicans don't really exist anymore. Republicans in the vein of Mitt Romney, Republicans in the vein of John Kasich. I mean, John Kasich ran in 2016. And it just seems ludicrous that a similar sort of candidate would run now. And there aren't really any Republicans in office. Marco Rubio ran in 2016 and ran as an anti-Trumper. And Marco Rubio is now hook, line, and sinker all in for MAGA. So is there a Republican out there that can return the Republican Party to its pre-Trump state? And I don't think there is. So as a result, the entire Republican primary will be very much, in some ways, I mean, this I guess is somewhat normal, very much in some ways like the 1988 Republican primary, when essentially it was who can be the third term of Ronald Reagan. And that's what essentially elected George H.W. Bush, even though really his presidency wasn't anything like Ronald Reagan's. But the fact that he was a loyal he was a loyal foot soldier for the Reagan Revolution, that allowed him to sort of piggyback off of Reagan's massive popularity. I don't think that Trump, as we point out, will have that same kind of national popularity. I think it's very likely that if the Democrats nominate somebody somewhat reasonable, that they can beat any of the Republican contenders. But that's a huge caveat. The idea that the Democrats can make a wise decision is not something I would bet money on. As you point out, so I'm going to dive into Democrats here. As you point out, Kelly, the socialist wing of the Democratic Party is in ascendancy. And I think that does well in hardcore urban centers like New York and Pennsylvania and wherever else. I don't think it does well enough across the country. The idea that that AOC can credibly win the presidency is kind of ludicrous to me for a number of reasons. One being, I think very much that one of the reasons Kamala Harris lost is she's a woman. And I don't say that, I say that as somebody who voted proudly for Kamala Harris. But you have, to some degree, I think, what they call the Bradley effect here. Are you familiar with the Bradley effect, Kelly?
Let's hear it.
Let's hear it. I grew up in California, and I think it was 1982-ish. It was sometime in the early 80s. The candidates for governor in California were George Deukmejian, who I think was the state attorney general, and Tom Bradley, who was the very popular mayor of Los Angeles. And also, he'd been the mayor, he was like a 4 or 5, maybe 6-term mayor. He'd been mayor my entire time in California. He'd been mayor forever. Very popular, very well respected. There is now a wing of LAX that is named after him. And he's passed away, a black man. And all of the polling showed Tom Bradley walking away with it, that George Deukmejian didn't have a prayer, and Bradley was ahead by double digits. And this was right up until the election. Election comes and goes. Tom Bradley loses. And they call this the Bradley effect. They've since called it the Wilder effect, because you had a black candidate for governor named Wilder, I don't remember his first name, in Virginia, where the same sort of thing happened. The black man is polling very well. You get to the election, the black man loses. The idea being that people don't want to tell pollsters that they're not voting for somebody because they are black. People know that that's not acceptable as a reason, and yet that still is a reason. I think something similar was happening with Kamala, in that people did not want to say, we don't want to vote for her because she's a woman, or because she is black, or because she is Indian. You know, there was Donald Trump kept talking about she suddenly turned black. You know, there are candidates that overcome this, obviously, and Barack Obama being the very prominent exception to this rule. But there are still people who won't vote for a woman to be president, and there are still people who won't vote for a black person to be president. And they know that that's not an acceptable excuse, so they don't tell other people. That's why they're not doing it. So the idea that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez could win a general election, I think, for so many reasons, is somewhat ludicrous. I think I think you have Pete Buttigieg, I think, would be the most reasonable nominee. I think the fact that he is a gay man plays into that as well. I think there are a lot of people that won't say this, but privately won't vote for a gay president. So that leaves, I think, in my mind, the most likely front runner for the Democrats to be Gavin Newsom of California, who has his own problems, but is a straight white heterosexual man and fairly mainstream liberal. He's not. One of the reasons I think Joe Biden won in 2020 is that Joe Biden had a reputation for being a moderate and not sort of a wild-eyed liberal. And I think he governed far more moderately than I think he gets credit for. But Newsom is more liberal than Biden was, but he's certainly not. Who's the socialist who just won the New York nomination?
Mondami.
Yeah, he's not him, and he's not AOC. So he strikes me as the likely front runner. And I think that if he were to be nominated, he could beat certainly DeSantis or Vance, because all all the Republicans have going for them is Trump. And right now, that's an awful lot because right now our entire government is the cult of personality of one man. And once you lose that cult of personality, I don't know that it translates to somebody else. And the fact that Trump is not wildly popular means that transferring the cult of personality the way it happened in '88 is not going to have the same sort of general election impact that it would have now. So that's a very long rant, very long. But so you got Newsom up there. Who are the other ones you've got in the topic?
This is from the Hill, so they list AOC as the most likely. Josh Shapiro, governor.
Josh Shapiro's Jewish,
and I think that'll help because of what's going on in Israel right now. Gretchen Whitmer, number 3, and they have in their power ranking Gavin Newsom, number 4.
Okay, I don't know who Maryland Governor Wes Moore is. I guess he's the governor of Maryland, but I don't know anything about him.
Well, we can read it. He's a candidate on the rise, powerful speaker, youthful at just 46, and a barrier breaker as Maryland's first Black governor.
Oh, okay.
Media friendly. I've seen him on TV. He's very well spoken. I think Kamala Harris, despite what you have said, was just not a good candidate and not well spoken, and came across, not because she's a woman or a Black woman or a Black Indian woman, she came across as a completely unprepared and unknowledgeable woman. That was my view. J.B. Pritzker, I think he's a long shot. It just seems like Illinois is in too much disarray for middle America to support. Pete Buttigieg, I just don't think he has a following and the financial ability, the ability to raise money. So anyway, that's why I think Josh Shapiro, even though he's number 2 on the Hill, he's number 1 in my mind for the Democrats.
I'm surprised Tim Walz isn't on there.
Yeah, I think that he blew his wad pretty badly.
Maybe not. I mean, I disagree with your assessment of Kamala, but I do agree that she's damaged goods. I can't imagine them handing the nomination over to her again, but I don't know how much of that damage spilled over to Tim Walz. I thought he was a really sort of compelling personality, and it was praised as a masterstroke when he was selected as the VP. I think he has he's got this sort of avuncular, normal guy vibe to him that Democrats, I think, sorely need. I think all of the people on this list come across to middle America as elitist, as I just think Tim Walz comes across as normal, and I think there is going to be a huge hunger for normal in 2028. So
I agree that he comes across as normal. I agree that the Democrats have got to do something to win back, not just white men, but men in general. They have spent the last decade kind of talking about how bad men are, toxic masculinity, things like that. But I think that a better water carrier for that would be Josh Shapiro.
Well, Josh Shapiro was the number 2 choice for vice president this last time around. A lot of people think it was a huge mistake not to pick him.
I am one.
And I think that Josh Shapiro, Josh, of everybody on that list, Josh Shapiro probably, well, between Shapiro and Newsom, I think that those are the 2 most normal. Buttigieg, you're right, probably can't raise money. Buttigieg, though, when you listen to Pete Buttigieg talk, I think it's impossible not to be impressed. He is so well-spoken and can talk about very complex issues in very simple, understandable terms. Just a really, really great communicator. But I think you're right in that raising money would be a huge issue for him. And really, again, I just don't think America is ready for a gay president. So, so Kelly and Brent, do you want to jump in here?
Oh, sorry, I had to find the mute button. Yeah, I'm not as into politics as you guys are, so I'm getting educated by listening to you guys. It's fun.
Well, what is our expert opinion from not an expert on this?
I've been holding in this comment, but personally, I didn't personally vote for Kamala Harris in the Democratic primary. I don't know anyone who did.
Yeah.
If you look at, I think the polling's wrong. All we have to do is look at who did perform the best on the Democratic primary. I'm sure if I take a random sample, surely at least one person can tell me one person who ran in those primaries.
Bernie Sanders, who's going to be 300 years old in 2020.
I think he's 302, but yeah.
I mean, Bernie Sanders did very, very well. I mean, as you go around the country,
he's 83.
Okay, yeah, so he's not going to run. But as you go around the country, it's Bernie Sanders and AOC who were. My own children went to a big Bernie Sanders AOC rally here in Utah, and it was jam-packed. I mean, so the base of the Democratic Party wants somebody who's Bernie Sanders who isn't 87 years old.
But I'm not sure it's the base of the Democratic Party. It's the
activists.
People who go to rallies. Yes, the activists.
Jim, Bernie Sanders wasn't in that primary.
Yeah, they're the only person who was in the last primary was the congressman from, where was it? Minnesota. It was God, I forgot his name. I'll get it here. Dean Phillips, Minnesota.
He was in the primary?
Yeah, but he was not allowed to get very many votes. He got 3.2% of the vote. But he was, because of what has Mark.
Oh, you're talking. So you're talking 2020 primary.
2020.
Yeah, you're right. There wasn't.
2024.
There wasn't. But there wasn't one. Joe Biden was the incumbent president. He was running again.
Yeah, but
president get the nomination when they asked.
Phillips was running against him, and he was allowed on some of the ballots. But as Mark pointed out, it was prevented from actually having any sort of.
Yeah, no, the Democrats shot themselves in the foot by running a president that couldn't be reelected. And so you're right. Not an expert that nobody voted for Kamala Harris in the primary, although they did vote for her as vice president. So, but I'm looking back at 2016, and there was a moment in the 2016 primary where Joe Biden was all but lost, and everybody had written him off for dead, and then he came back roaring back in the South Carolina primary, and because the battle was Bernie versus Biden, and it was Biden that finally prevailed. So 2020 primary, not 2016 primary. Anyway, so but beyond that, your speculation, not an expert, as to who the nominees will be.
I have none.
All right.
That's probably the safest way to be. I was just looking at how the front runners did in past elections. We all remember Hubert Humphreys, who was the presidential candidate in 1976. until Jimmy Carter came out of nowhere and beat him. How Gerald Ford was obviously going to be president after Nixon, but Ronald Reagan beat him. Jesse Jackson was a front runner until
Ford didn't run in 1980.
or
Ford
1976.
76.
Yeah, he in 76. Yes, I'm sorry. Jesse Jackson was a front runner in 1988 until Dukakis ran and tried to drive a tank. Rudy Giuliani was way the front runner in the 2028 election until John McCain, who I think everybody in the Senate disliked, but he was a great American hero. Got to give him that. And of course, Hillary Clinton all the way in 2008 until an unknown, very charismatic first-term United States Senator from Illinois came out of nowhere, Barack Obama. Howard Dean was a front runner in 2004. Yeah! Until John Kerry became the candidate, Jerry Brown in 92, until some unknown governor from...
Jerry Brown was never the front runner in 92.
I was looking at the polls and it said that he was. Maybe he was a poll in 91. And then Bill Clinton came out of nowhere. George McGovern was going to win the presidency until Richard Nixon came along and won every single state, I think, except for Minnesota. So Jeb Bush, obviously, he was a front runner for the Republicans. We have a long history of people making grand predictions and them not coming true. So I'm looking forward to seeing not Josh Shapiro and not J.D. Vance in 2028.
Well, William Goldman, who is a screenwriter who wrote The Princess Bride and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and many other things, is famous for saying that in Hollywood, nobody knows anything. And that translates very much into politics. It's always amazing that when I turn on the television and look at pundits very confidently making predictions, I think, how is it that people are paying you that much money when you don't know anything? Any more than I do. You don't know any more than anybody else. Nobody knows anything. So this is kind of fun, but you're absolutely right. We just don't know. And there will be many twists and turns and surprises. I remember in 2008, I remember, Kelly, I was in a restaurant with you and we were pitching to a guy who was trying to run for office in Nevada. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Who was that guy? He run?
I think he ran. I don't think he made it out of the primary, mostly because I don't think we helped him.
Yeah, he didn't hire your company. But I remember asking him, who do you think is going to be the nominee in 2008? He says, oh, you mean the election between Hillary Clinton and Rudy Giuliani? This was...
Yeah.
Rudy Giuliani flamed out so quickly and so spectacularly that by the time he got to the convention in 2008, he had precisely one delegate.
But up until the primaries, he was the guy.
It was a done deal. It was going to be Hillary versus Giuliani. It was going to be two New York politicians, and Hillary was far more viable. It became pretty obvious fairly clearly that Obama was going to get the nomination, but Hillary put up a good fight. But Giuliani, Giuliani was a complete non-factor in the 2008 election. And in 2016, Jeb Bush was a complete non-factor.
Yep.
Jeb Bush went absolutely nowhere. So yeah, there was an issue.
But in 2014, it was obviously Jeb Bush.
Bush was the guy, yeah. No
chance anybody else was going to come along.
So I would love it if Jeb Bush could be the nominee.
But let's canonize that. Recruit Jeb Bush.
Yeah, Jeb exclamation point.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that really killed Jeb Bush, this is back when I thought Scott Adams wasn't an imbecile. Do you know who Scott Adams is? The Dilbert.
Yeah, I think I like him.
well, he began just sort of as talking about being sort of an impartial observer of the election, and he was one of the first people to say that Trump can and will win, and so was seen as sort of a sage because everybody thought, yeah, no, Trump really can't win. My father was still alive in 2015 and was interviewed about it publicly and said, Trump is Howard Dean, only worse. I mean, as we get closer, the Republicans will get serious and they will nominate a serious candidate. And Scott Adams said, no, Trump has powers of persuasion that are really remarkable. And he says, and one of the things is his nicknames are sticky and they define his opponents. And do you remember his nickname for Jeb Bush?
Yeah, tell me, because I'm struggling here.
Low energy Jeb.
Yeah. Yep.
And you couldn't look at Jeb Bush and not see that. It's like, yeah, he is low energy Jeb. And
very accurate.
And the funniest thing was that Jeb then I think that's when Jeb made his switch to a logo that was Jeb ! Because that exclamation point, that's some energy right there.
Yeah.
And he just looked increasingly crooked Hillary stuck. I don't know, Lion Ted. I don't know if that one was as good, but low energy Jeb was just absolutely perfect. So, and it was Sleepy Joe.
Joe. That's my favorite.
Sleepy Joe. Anyway, so all right. Well, so we have engaged in the time-honored tradition of not knowing anything but pretending like we do.
But it is. What reality is way more exciting than fiction. So it's going to, whatever turns out, I can't wait to see how this chapter writes in itself in history. So it's exciting to see what's going to happen. And I'm still worried that they're going to try and find some way to get Trump into a third term.
You and me both.
Well, if that happens, I will buy both of you a milkshake. If it's Josh Shapiro and JD Vance in 2028, you guys both owe me a milkshake.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm going to have chocolate and peanut butter in mine.
Yeah.
If anybody else wants to get in on the whole milkshake deal, I recommend they go to Canonizer and they join one of these camps. If one of these camps does not reflect your point of view, be sure to create a camp of your own and let's start building consensus around this. So,
yeah.
All right. So with that, very much appreciate all of you guys participating here in our discussion and appreciate everybody who has watched this discussion and hope to see you all around on Canonizer this coming week. Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks.
All right.
Bye-bye.